series for 2016. My name is Brian Haley, and I'm your presenter for this evening. So the topic tonight, the title of our presentation is Living in the Present Moment. The subtitle is A Skillful Way of Being. So what are our learning outcomes for tonight for the presentation? What can we take away with us at the end of the presentation? Excuse me. First of all, we'll be looking at some quotes from various sources, authors, poets, psychologists, so on. Different people giving various opinions and ideas and concepts on what it means to live in the present moment. And we'll do that to give a kind of a foundation for what the talk is about, and to kind of set the tone, and to show that there's many different people from many different walks of life that have approached this topic and approached this concept, and have given it some thought and contemplated about it. What does it actually mean, and how can we apply that in our lives, and so on. So we'll do that for just to get a good start on the presentation for this evening. After that, we're going to jump into looking at what the challenges are, the challenges and the difficulties of trying to live in the present moment. What kinds of things we can expect that may block us in our efforts, and what kinds of things, of course, could cause difficulties in terms of applying that in our lives, in our everyday lives, in our work life, in our family life, and so on and so forth. Next, we're going to look at why is it important? Why is it important to even be concerned about this idea of living in the present moment? And why is it important to apply that to our lives? How does it affect us? What are the excuse me, what are the benefits for me? What can I take away from this that's going to be helpful in my own life? And hopefully we'll come away with some ideas and some things that we can apply in our lives to actually live more fully in the present moment. And then lastly, of course, how can I be more present? How can I live more fully in the present moment? And we'll look at some different ways that we can do that. Before we go to the next step here, I just wanted to say that, and apologize, I do have a cold this evening, and if the occasional time there's a bit of a pause, it's just me muting my microphone and getting a sip of water so I can keep my voice in good shape for the evening. So my apologies ahead of time for that. So if there is a bit of a pause and you wonder where I went, that's what it is. And, but we'll carry on. So let's look at some quotes now. This first one here is from Marianne Williamson, an author and philosopher, and she says that the present moment, if you think about it, is the only time there is. No matter what time it is always now. Kind of a simple statement, but actually, if we look at it and evaluate it and contemplate it, it's very true. This quote's from Abraham Maslow, a famous psychologist from the 50s and 60s, wrote several books on human development and self-awareness and how to get the most out of life and so on and so forth. And so he thought a lot about these kinds of concepts and so on. And what he says here is the ability to be in the present moment is a major component of mental wellness. This is the conclusion that he arrived at after all of his research and writings and so on. I would like to have it for my whole life. You will, the other part of him said, you will. You have it now, and that is all your whole life is, now. And that's from Ernest Hemingway, famous author, of course. Happiness not in another place, but this place, not for another hour, but this hour. Well put. Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. And this is from the Buddha. One of my favorites here. What day is it? It's today, squeaked Piglet. My favorite day, said Pooh. And of course, our favorite Pooh, Winnie the Pooh. So, living in the present moment. Excuse me, the challenges. So, if we're not living in the present moment, where are we? Mostly we're focused on stories from the past or the future, or we're focused on stories about me, or you, or the other, as we might say. And generally, what gets us in trouble here is that we end up believing the thoughts that are going through our mind about the past and the future, about ourselves and others. So it's not so much the thoughts that are getting us in trouble, it's that we're believing these thoughts. So in addition to that, the problem with thinking is not merely that we believe our thoughts, but that we that we are building our identity or our sense of self with them. So every time a thought's coming through our mind, we're actually unconsciously building our sense of self with those thoughts. And as we'll see as we go through this presentation, a lot of those thoughts really should not be believed and we should not attach ourselves to or build our identity with. And we'll see why as we go along. Another way to say that, I guess, is that the thoughts themselves, in and of themselves, are not the problem, but it is our belief in them that is the problem. In terms of stories about me or you, what we're doing there usually is we're having thoughts, judgmental thoughts. We're judging ourselves. We're blaming ourselves for something that we did, or we're regretting something, or blaming ourselves, and so on. Or we're judging somebody else, and we're having judgmental thoughts about them. Not always, but usually that's what's going on. And it's our thoughts, really, of the past that are creating the feelings of guilt and blame and regret. And in the same way, it's our belief in our thoughts of the future that often lead to the experience of stress and anxiety as well. The worst suffering often comes not from the situation itself, but from what we tell ourselves about it. And this is from Richard Moss. Dr. Moss will be looking at quite a bit of his work, along with others, but he has a quite useful and helpful book called Inside Out Healing, and there's information about that at the end of the presentation as well. For any of you that wish to do further reading and so on. But we'll touch on Dr. Moss's work a bit more as we go along here. Every hour, stop and ask, am I really present in this moment? If not, what are my thoughts focused on? Doing this often will help you return to the present moment. Do not look back and grieve over the past, for it is gone. And do not be troubled about the future, for it has yet to come. Live in the present and make it so beautiful that it will be worth remembering. The art of living is neither careless drifting on the one hand, nor fearful clinging to the past on the other. It consists in being sensitive to each moment, in regarding it as utterly new and unique, and having the mind open and wholly receptive. This is from Alan Watts, philosopher and writer. So we might ask ourselves, what's the advantage of living in the present? Well, for starters, as we've seen, we've just covered that by attempting to be more present in our lives, we can reduce those thoughts of anxiety and thoughts of regret and blame and so on. We can reduce our ruminations, thoughts that are spinning around in our head, or are worrying about what has happened or what might happen in the future. And then, of course, we want to ask, how will this benefit me? How will it benefit me to live more in the present moment? No amount of guilt can change the past, and no amount of worrying can change the future. And from one of my favorite philosophers, Groucho Marx, I, not events, have the power to make me happy or unhappy today. I can choose which it shall be. Yesterday is dead. Tomorrow hasn't arrived yet. I have just one day today, and I'm going to be happy in it. So we've all heard things like let go of the past, let it go, time to move on, etc. And there's truth in those statements for sure. But it doesn't mean that we need to let go of everything from the past. Obviously not. We hang on to the good things, the good memories, the knowledges that we've gained, things that are useful for us in our work and in our life, and so on. There will always be there. They will always be there to draw on when we need them. What is skillful, however, is to release really more of the fears and the grudges and the hurts and the clingings and the disappointments from the past that grieve our spirit and bind our heart. When we do this, we are doing what the Buddhists call skillful means. My life has been filled with terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened. Mark Twain. I do apologize to you, those of you who have seen previous presentations by me. I've used this quote before, but I really like it because it just says so much in one small quote. To live here and now, you must train yourself. In the seen, there will be just the seen. In the heard, just the heard. In the sensed, just the sensed. In the thought, just the thought. That is the end of sorrow. So what we said before, we're always experiencing thoughts and feelings and emotions. That's the human predicament. That's the human experience. But the idea here that we're talking to or pointing to is that when a thought arises in the mind, and it's a thought about blame or regret, or it's a thought anxiously worrying about the future, then those are the thoughts that are getting us in trouble, causing our suffering. So when a thought arises and we see it just for what it is, or we're aware of it, as the Buddha is saying here, we're aware of that thought or that feeling or emotion, and then we simply allow it to pass, which they always do. That is the end of suffering, the end of sorrow, as the Buddha says. So does this mean that I should give up thinking about the past or future altogether? Well, not at all. However, the more we bring awareness to these thought processes, or better yet, the more we can be aware of when we're actually getting caught up in believing our thoughts, then the more we can free ourselves from them and free ourselves from the power that they seem to have over us, or rather the power that we give them. So why is it important? Why is it important to focus on the present moment? How is this going to affect us? What are the benefits? Well, happiness is achieved when we stop waiting for our life to begin and start making the most of the moment we are in. And as we've seen, when our focus is stuck on the past or future, we create anxiety, stress, unhappiness, and suffering in our lives. It's true that we should learn from the past, there's no question about that, and that we should plan for the future. That goes without saying. We need to plan for the future, so that entails thinking about the future. But however, it's how we do that that's important in terms of our overall sense of well-being and ultimately our happiness. So what's the positive impact of being present or living in the present moment then? The power for creating a better future is contained in the present moment. You create a good future by creating a good present. And this quote is from Eckhart Tolle, and he wrote a very influential book called Power of Now. Some of you may have heard of it. Some of you perhaps might have even read it. Excellent book, by the way, for those of you that are interested in following up on that. When we are truly present, wherever we are, we bring peace. The more we practice living in the present moment, the more peace we're going to discover in our lives, and the more we're going to have a positive impact on those around us. In fact, when we make this a way of life, we impact everything in our life. All of our relations, all of our activities, our work life, our private life, and really all aspects of our life. So as Jack says here, when we're truly present, we're bringing peace. So an example I wanted to give you about that is like, and I think we've all experienced this, have you ever noticed when you're with a good listener and how attentive they are to what you're saying? And they seem to be like fully there, fully present. And they aren't making judgments about what we're saying, they're simply listening. They're trying to really hear what it is we're saying. We have their full attention. And when we do, when we experience that with a person, we feel heard. We feel like they're listening. And when this happens, we feel good, don't we? We feel acknowledged, we feel validated and accepted. And this is what it means to be fully present for someone, fully in the present moment. We're not lost in our own thoughts and making judgments about what the person's saying or what I'm going to say after as soon as they finish and so on and so forth. We're actually giving them our full attention without being distracted by those kinds of thoughts. And I think all of us have experienced this at some point in our lives, and perhaps we've been the person that's been the good listener, and we've experienced it from that side of the fence. And either way, I think most of us are aware of the difference, aren't we? We can feel it in a sense. We can feel that presence that the person that's listening has. So as you become more present in your own life, you will begin to enlighten others by your example as well. Yeah, now I'd like to move on to the mandala of being, the mandala of being. So this is originated by Dr. Moss in his book Inside Out Healing. And this is a way to illustrate what we've been talking about so far here, that we have the now moment, the present that we live in, and then we can also, though, be distracted or get caught up in thoughts of the past or the future, thoughts about me or thoughts about you or other. So really, there's only one now, as we know. If we think about it, there's only one now, one present moment. But there's actually, in a sense, 5 different ways, or from a psychological point of view, of now. And the reason they overlap, of course, is because when we're having a thought about the past, regretting something we did or feeling guilty or whatnot, we're always having those thoughts in the present moment, aren't we? we're distracted, and we're affected by the emotions that go along with that. The same with the future. When we're thinking about the future, whether it's anticipation or expectation, or whether we're having really anxious or worrying thoughts about the future, those are always occurring right now, right here and now, in the present. And the same goes for thoughts about me and for you. I just wanted to read one small piece from Dr. Moss's book here, just to illustrate this a little further. And what he says here is that there are only 4 places your thinking can carry you into when you aren't fully grounded in the present. Once you grasp the 4 ways you leave the now, or the present moment, you simultaneously understand how to return to your aware self, which is always in the now. A practical tool for the practice of presence, the mandala of being, will help you wake up and live more in awareness instead of in your head, in the thinking mode. In this way, you learn how to meet life's greatest challenges with much less suffering. So just being aware of this and aware of how the thinking mind gets pulled away from the present moment, just being aware of this, that's a huge benefit to bringing us back into being fully present. So, and again, what the mandala is showing us is that our emotional reality is not caused by something outside of us. It's really going on inside of us. It's my thought about you and my judgments about you or the other. It's my worrisome thoughts about the future and so on and so forth. That's the emotional reality that's created, and it's being created within me, within my thinking mind. So it's caused by our own thoughts and the stories that we tell ourselves, or about others, or about the past, or about the future. So the mandala is also showing us that there are the 4 ways in which we can build a mental reality that, in a sense, is not actually real, and in which we can and do create immense emotional suffering, unfortunately. When we're distracted from the present moment, in fact, we're almost invariably causing our own emotional suffering. So the idea here is to bring ourselves back to the now position. As soon as we notice what's going on, as soon as we notice that we're being pulled in one of these other directions. However, when I'm suggesting that we move back into the now position, what we're really saying here is that it's about a choice. And what is that choice? The choice to consciously step away from our thinking mind and bring our awareness fully back into the present. And what that usually means is to bring our attention back to the body, to the sensations and so on that are happening in the body. Because if we think about it, the only time we can be aware of the body is in the present moment. We can't be aware of it in the past or in the future. So awareness of the body helps us to connect with our feeling mode of consciousness, and that anchors us in the present moment. And the more we bring awareness to the body in the present moment, we find ourselves in the now. So, sometimes we can, I guess I would say that as we bring our attention back to the present moment and become more and more aware of what's happening in our body, we will start to feel bodily sensations that might show up as tightness in the shoulders, or tension in the stomach, rapid breathing. It's different for all of us. But the reason I bring attention to that is that for different people, so we'll say that tightness in the shoulders tells me that I'm feeling anxious about the future. So I'm getting the signal already in the body that I'm being pulled away from the present moment. So that's why awareness of the body is so important. Or that tightness in the stomach might be saying that I'm feeling some regret or guilt about something that happened in the past. So it's a way It's a signal, and we become aware of that, and then we know that we are being pulled away from the present moment. So we use that as a tool, as an anchor, so to speak. And over time, we get to a place of being able to read the bodily sensations and messages that are telling us whether we are in flow or whether we're in resistance. So a useful example might be, would you rather look at and analyze a grape, or would you rather taste it? And we'll touch on this concept a little more as we go along here. But first, let's expand on this a little bit with Dr. Moss's description of the emotions associated with the Mandela of being, because that's really where we get caught. It's the emotions that are generated from these various thoughts. So when we're focusing on the me part of that diagram, we're either getting caught up in a grandiose kind of specialness, or feeling superior, or powerful, arrogant, so on. Or often we're feeling a kind of depressive specialness. We're feeling inferior, or sad, or inadequate, unlovable, and so on. When we're caught up in you or other, we're having elevating judgments like appreciation, adoration, so on. Or we're having diminishing judgments of the other, rage, resentment, jealousy, and so on. When we're caught up in the past, we're either having positive reminiscences, we're proud or happy, nostalgic, or we're having negative ones, guilt, blame, regret, so on. As for the future, we're having positive expectancies, we're hopeful, we're eager, enthusiastic, and so on. Or we're having negative expectancies, we're worried or anxious, possibly even terrified. So most of us, of course, would prefer positive reminiscences or expectations, which is normal. And but even though they may be more welcome than those that frighten or depress us, they don't bring as much intuitive wisdom or healing energy as when we're resting in the present moment. And in fact, as we learn how to be more present, the process of waking up, as Dr. Moss calls it, waking up in the middle of any of these stories, we might be telling ourselves, will begin to happen automatically. When we understand that dwelling in pleasant reminiscences can also be a way of avoiding life, why would we choose to go there too often rather than rest in the fullness of ourselves in the present moment? And so this idea leads us to, how can we learn to be more present? What can we do to learn to live more fully in the present moment? Being in the present moment is to move away from thinking to awareness of our thinking. We are not our thoughts or emotions, we are the witness of them. So this is an important point here. And this has to do with the awareness versus thinking. Have you ever noticed how we like to say, or we do say in our common conversations with people, we say my body, my mind, my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, etc. And this is natural, isn't it? Of course we say that. Well, perhaps the next logical question might be, who is the me that is saying my body, my thoughts, etc.? Well, the me is who we are. So we, you and I, are the witness. We're the observer of the thoughts and the feelings and so on. Therefore, we could say, well, the thoughts and the feelings are not me, and they're not you. We're witnessing them, we're observing them. We're observing the thoughts arising, and then they pass away. We're observing feelings and emotions in our body that are there for a while, and then they pass along. We know this is just a natural way of being and the human experience. And remembering this, of course, helps us to live in the present moment. And when does this witnessing take place? It takes place in the present moment, of course. There's no other place that it can take place. Consider that everywhere in the universe, it is now. I like this little statement by Dr. Moss, because really we think like we're here in Canada, or think somebody on the other side of the Earth, or there's some intelligent life in some other planets out there that they've been discovering, or even as far away as the other side of the universe. It is now. It's always now. So this just helps us to bring it into perspective. And another way that we can look at this is that being in the now is simply another way of describing the quality of our attention. The aliveness or the felt quality of every single moment of life depends on the degree to which we are simultaneously focused and spacious, but also ready, but also relaxed. And that's the essence, really, of truly living in the present moment. And the more we practice that, the more we discover that. But be it a thought or feeling such as sorrow, fear, or love, there is always a larger space in which those specific thoughts or feelings are experienced. So that larger space, of course, that we're talking about is our awareness, our consciousness. And when we pay attention to our awareness, we are always in the present moment. It's impossible really to pay attention to our awareness at any other time in the present. And I just want to turn to Dr. Moss's book one more time here. And just read a small passage here in regards to this. He says that as essential as thinking is, there is one thing that you can never think about, the now. That is, you can't get outside of the present to make it an object of thought. Our thinking is an abstract relationship to life, a mental representation. It is never anchored in something real, like your body and its sensations and your true feelings. Thinking interprets and describes your body or feelings, but it does not actually let you know either of them directly. Only awareness does that. So that larger space, that larger space that our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions kind of appear in, basically. That's what we're talking about, the awareness or the consciousness. And that's always found in the present moment. So, three of the things that we can look at in terms of how we can live more fully in the present moment start with these kinds of concepts here: forgiveness, compassion, and resilience. These are, well, they're all good places to start the process of being more present, of living more fully in the present moment. Because if we think about it, forgiveness is letting go of the past, isn't it? Compassion, whether it's compassion for others or compassion for myself, self-compassion, what we're really doing is we're dropping the judgmental thoughts, judgments of yourself, judgments of others. Resilience helps us to have that good foundation and bring a sense of ease about the future. We're not so inclined to fall into anxious thoughts and worrying thoughts about the future if we have developed our own resilience. So when we look at issues like anger and blame, conflict, resentment, these kinds of things, they usually arise out of our fear as well. So when we're afraid, our body tightens up, our heart becomes constricted, and our mind becomes almost as if it's possessed, really. We can't really live wisely in this kind of a state. And we certainly can't achieve happiness either. So forgiveness releases us from the past and the power that it seems to have over us. It allows us to see with kind and compassionate eyes and to rest in a resilient and wise heart. Oh, forgive me, it's just that your head looks a lot like an acorn. So here's a quote from Stephen Levine, one of my favorite authors of several books, a very wise person himself, and very heart-centered too, I must say. Stephen says here, clearly all fear has an element of resistance and a leaning away from the moment. Its dynamic is not unlike that of a strong desire, except that fear leans backward into the last safe moment, while desire leans forward toward the next possibility of satisfaction. Each lacks presence. So each of those, whether we're leaning backwards or leaning forward, we're not really living in the present moment. We're not being fully present. So if we look at our own lives and we find that perhaps we're not as compassionate to others or to ourselves that we might like to be, then some kind of compassion practice, self-compassion or compassion to others, or some sort of outward activity can be helpful in bringing us more fully into the present. Some examples are, of course, I've mentioned mindfulness meditation in some of my other presentations, but another one that's part of the mindfulness meditation approach is called loving kindness meditation. And there's another one that's specifically called self-compassion meditation. And there's lots of opportunities to learn mindfulness meditation in almost all of the large centers in cities and so on. Oh, excuse me, I had to go away there for a moment to have a sip of water. We're back again. So for those of you that may feel also that you're not quite as resilient as we'd like to be, working on developing our emotional intelligence or other resiliency factors can be helpful. And what I'd like to point you to here is several of the previous webinars that I've done on these topics: forgiveness, compassion, and resilience, and also on emotional intelligence. And you can access these at the Humanicare website. It's humanalife.ca, humanalife.ca. And that's written down on the last slide on the presentation, for those of you that would like to follow up on that. So next, don't just do something, sit there. So for most of us, the better portion of our day is spent engaged in some activity, isn't it? It's just kind of how life is. We go from one activity to another. We're getting up in the morning, getting the kids ready for school, or off to work, and we come home, there's maybe soccer practice or whatever. It's always got all kinds of things that are taking up our time. And it's not that this is bad, of course. It's not a bad thing. It's just what life is. It's how life is, how it is for most of us. It's just that within that overall sort of context, we usually don't make enough time for simply sitting quietly, sitting silently and still. And this is how we learn to connect to the present moment, sitting silently, sitting still. So we might call this meditation or contemplation or simply sitting quietly for a while, enjoying the silence. However, for those of you that would like to have some help in getting to that quiet place, there are lots of practices like mindfulness meditation, and I would add to that yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, for example, or simply just being in nature. Sitting quietly in nature is very rejuvenative and also helps us to be in the present moment. And for those of you that are more activity oriented, then I would suggest the movement practices like yoga and Tai Chi and so on. They'll probably be more helpful. These are called the meditation dogs. The key to meditation is learning to stay. Mindfulness is like that. It is the miracle which can call back in a flash our dispersed mind and restore it to wholeness so that we can live each moment of life. So that dispersed mind, of course, is what we touched on earlier. Getting caught up in the past, the future, or me or you, that kind of thing. So with practice, we can come to experience what it's like to be fully in the present moment. And to get a better idea of what it's like, I guess we can say what it's like to be fully in the present moment. I'm going to read a quote here from Richard Moss to give us an idea of what we're talking about. So your body is awake and ready, yet profoundly relaxed. Your mind is simultaneously focused, yet spacious. You are present with and not at all in conflict with what is. What he means by what is simply the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions that are arising. But we don't have a conflict with those. We can see them, we're aware of them, and we just simply let them pass. That's the practice of being in the present moment. As Jack Kornfield says, from this center of stillness, we can enter life fully, yet our heart remains free. And there's this perspective. Come on, inner peace, I don't have all day. I think most of us can relate to that. Here's a nice quote from William Butler Yeats, a famous Irish poet. We can make our minds so like still water that beings gather around us, that they may see their own images, and so live for a moment with a clearer, perhaps even fiercer life because of our quiet. And one last quote here. Maybe life is all about twirling under one of those midnight skies, cutting a swath through the breeze, and gently closing your eyes. Perhaps that's presence, living in the present moment. Oh yeah, so often people ask me about children and how we can teach children these kinds of concepts. So I just wanted to share with you a few different books here for those that are interested. The first one up on the upper left is called What Does It Mean to Be Present? The other three are about mindfulness. Little Monkey Calms Down, I like that one. And the other ones are also useful too. You can check those out for those that would like to. Yes, so now we arrive at the time for questions. So if any of you listening tonight have any questions, please feel free to type them in there, and I will do my best to answer them. So feel free to go ahead and type your questions in there. Okay, let me just have a look here and see what we got here. Somebody said, awesome, thank you very much. Someone here, a listener, Tony, says, I find it much easier to be in present at work than I do at home. That's interesting. Yeah, I guess, well, it depends. Maybe you have children at home too, Tony, and that can, I certainly remember when my kids were small, and it was very hard to be present in those situations. Perhaps if you're interested, you could follow up with some of those children's books and apply that to that. I think usually the best way, though, with children, I wanted to add to that, those books are very helpful, but it's also the most helpful thing, of course, is for each and every one of us to be working on in our own lives and being more fully present. And then, of course, by example, our children and actually everybody else around us too is going to benefit from that. Okay, so if anyone else feels like piping in there and asking a question, please feel free. I invite you to do so. I think while we're waiting to see if there's any other questions, I'll just go through these last slides here. So yes, the sources and further study for those that are interested. Excellent book by Dr. Moss, as we've touched on in this presentation, called Inside Out Healing. And he has numerous exercises and examples that you can use to apply these teachings into your own life and to help people closely to your family and so on and so forth. Very powerful book. It's very straightforward. He's a medical doctor, so he comes at it from a kind of a scientific point of view, but also from a kind of a wider, broader perspective as well. Very heart-centric too. But I highly recommend that book for anybody that's interested in following up. Also, The Art of Forgiveness, and so on, by Jack Kornfield. And I've mentioned this book in some of my other presentations. Also, a wonderful book, and there's lots of different meditations that you can do and practice in there on forgiveness and on loving kindness and so on that I find very helpful, and I know others have too. And Jack, again, is very, he's an excellent speaker, an excellent presenter himself, and also a good author. He's got some very useful things in that book. The other one that I had mentioned earlier is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I highly recommend this book. It was life-changing for me reading that book many years ago, and I do recommend that book for anybody that is also interested in living more fully in the present moment. And of course, without having to purchase a book, you can go online and you can access numerous articles from psychologytoday.com. They have many, many good articles on living in the present moment, and I would highly recommend that. Looks like I have another question here, so I'll just take a minute here and look at this. Some time must be spent thinking about the future, as one's life is significantly influenced by imagining our future. Yes, well, it's very true. We do have to take time to think about the future and to plan. We would be very irresponsible, actually, to not do so. So we do need to take time to imagine our future and to look at the future and make our plans for ourselves and for our family. And of course, in our work, depends on what we're doing at work and what that entails and so on. But yes, very definitely. whoever it was that asked that question. I didn't see his name here. Oh, Lab, I think. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Yeah, so that's very true. You make a good point. And I think I did mention somewhere in the presentation that we do have to think and plan about the future. And but what we're saying here is that when we get in trouble is when we start believing the thoughts that we're having about the future or about the past or about me or other, especially when they're those negative thoughts. And that's when we start to get in trouble and we're causing all kinds of emotional suffering for ourselves. So that's the difference there. Sitting down and thinking and imagining our future and setting a plan in motion is a positive thing. So that's the difference there. We want to get away from the troublesome thoughts that cause these troublesome emotions that are causing the suffering and the sorrow. That's the key difference there. Thank you very much for that question. And actually, thank you to everybody for the other questions as well. I'm just having a look here to see if there's any other ones. I don't see any other questions right now, but that's, we'll give it a couple more minutes if anybody feels like they would like to contribute there. The one other thing I wanted to point out here, of course, is that on this slide that's up on the screen now is humanalife.ca, and you can access the previous webinars, all of the previous webinars, really, that have been done through this HumanCare series. The specific ones that I pointed to are ones that I've done in the past on forgiveness and on compassion and emotional intelligence and resilience, those kinds of things. And there's some very helpful things in those presentations, I believe. And also, all of those, by focusing on those topics, it's an excellent way to help to bring us more into the present moment and to live more fully in the present. Okay, let's have one last look here, see if there's any other questions. Okay, so I guess not. So again, to all of you who have asked questions, thank you for doing so. Thank you for participating. And we'll end the presentation now. And thank you for your time and attention. Again, my name is Brian Haley, a registered clinical counselor in British Columbia. And for those of you that would like to get a hold of HumanCare resources to do with this webinar or any other issue, here's the information for you. Email and also phone numbers and so on. So thank you again for participating tonight. I appreciate it.